Hey everybody, Bob Lazaro here from All Things Leland. Thank you for joining us today. North Carolina has more than 3,300 miles of coast, and part of the effort to help protect it is the North Carolina Coastal Federation. And we're pleased to be joined today by Bonnie Mitchell, who is the Southeastern North Carolina Coastal Education Coordinator. Bonnie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
You're welcome. I'm sure this is becoming a very busy time of year for you as people's attention turns to the beach, etc. What I'm really attracted to organizations like yours is the effort to help educate teachers, parents, and children. So maybe give us a little brief overview, and then we could talk about some specific things.
Sure, absolutely. I would love to do that. And again, thanks for giving us this opportunity. As you mentioned, I'm the Coastal Education Coordinator for the North Carolina Coastal Federation, which is a nonprofit that works to protect and restore our coast. We've been around since 1982. We operate out of all 20 coastal counties. And how we work to protect and restore the coast, when I talk about the coast, oftentimes people immediately picture that beautiful beachfront. I don't blame them. I love spending my days on the beach, but so often forgotten, neglected, taken advantage of are our coastal wetlands, our estuaries, where the river meets the sea, and our salt marsh habitats, our oyster reefs are. This is where all the action is happening.
Mhm.
This is where all our wildlife is. It's so important not only for our coastal environment as a whole, but also our coastal economy. And so we really hone in on those coastal wetlands and some approaches we take to that protection and restoration is keeping our coastal waters clean and clear, protecting our salt marsh habitats, our oyster reefs, and keeping our estuaries free of marine debris. And we do this through a variety of ways, not only through that hands on the ground restoration work, but also through education and outreach, as well as advocacy and advocating for effective coastal management. But of course, my role specifically is within that education and outreach
Mhm.
portion. So I am blessed to be able to educate all ages. This
Okay.
is really wonderful for me
Mhm.
in that I'm never really burnt out on one audience. I'm
Sure.
always getting to work with different audiences, and I find that is a big benefit. We, of course, work with our K through 12 schools, different community organizations as well that serve K through 12. Examples might be Dream Center for Arts Education or the Boys and Girls Club. And then, of course, we work with different college organizations and universities, Cape Fear Community College, Brunswick Community College, UNC Wilmington, UNC Pembroke. Those are some of our strong
Sure.
partners in the Southeast region. And then adults as well, through different community presentations and also heavily through our volunteer work.
Okay. One of the things that in looking at the website is your teaching for teachers, and
Yes.
what does that involve? And has that become part of the curriculum here in North Carolina, talking about coastal education?
Yes, in different areas. Again, every county is a little bit
Sure.
different. And so we're very blessed in the New Hanover County to have our stormwater runoff, talking about our watersheds. That has been established in the middle school seventh grade curriculum, which is really exciting.
Okay.
But that's definitely part of our continuing work is trying to
Okay.
establish that in the curriculum in our different counties. Um, I will give all of the credit, or the majority of the credit, at least, to our educators in our central region and northeast region, Sarah Hallis, Rachel Bessesi. They are phenomenal, fantastic, and they lead teacher workshops where they bring in teachers to teach them these different lesson plans
Okay.
around the work that we do so that they can then go bring this into the classroom. In the Southeast region, we work with a little bit, we work a little bit differently in that we partner with other
Okay.
organizations that are doing these teacher workshops to get in that curriculum. So, for example, with Young Scientist Academy, the Fort Fisher Aquarium,
Okay.
and other folks, we work with them to teach the teachers.
Okay. No, well, no one can do it alone, right?
Exactly.
It's just such a long coastal area and certainly fast growing. Brunswick County is the sixth fastest growing county in the United States. And I spoke to the
Right.
superintendent of schools, and they're expecting 6,000 new students over the next 10 years. School
Right.
system is going to double in the next 20. So part of the K-12 programs of importance to everybody, regardless, is stormwater and rain gardens. And can you briefly explain what that's all about and how that works and
Absolutely.
what can a homeowner do if they were interested as well?
Absolutely. I love talking about this because as a homeowner myself, we have a really wonderful opportunity to help the environment by just doing some simple things within our own home, business owners as well. We have an opportunity to not be a part of the problem.
Hmm.
We have an opportunity to really help our environment. And so when we talk about stormwater runoff, I really like to break it down so we understand exactly what we're talking about, right? So stormwater runoff, it is a natural process. Rain comes down, it runs off and forms into that closest water body. That might be a creek, that might be a river. Here on our coast, oftentimes it's going directly into the intracoastal waterway.
Sure.
And but what's not natural is all the hardened surfaces that we have today, right? The rooftops, the parking lots, the driveways. We are just expediting the water that's going into these water bodies. Whereas 200 years ago, there was a lot of opportunity for the water to soak in
Sure.
the ground, and the ground was a great filter so that the groundwater was being recharged with nice, clean, filtered water. But that's not what's happening
No.
today. And here on the coast, we also have another issue. So we talk about stormwater runoff, and oftentimes what we're really talking about is the pollution within that
Hmm.
stormwater runoff, right?
Yes.
The nitrates from fertilizers, the pesticides that are killing our water and disrupting it with the chemicals, bacteria, people not picking up their dog poop.
Right.
That is a big issue. Our ecosystem is just not balanced for all
Hmm.
that excess bacteria. It does a lot of damage. Sediment and dirt. People aren't, for example, if construction zones aren't following the necessary regulations and rules, we get all this added
Sure.
sediment and dirt into our water. That messes up the turbidity, is really harmful for our coastal ecosystems, such as our underwater seagrasses. They need up to 40% more sunlight than our land plants do. That's what's also responsible. The underwater seagrasses, they help keep the turbidity
Hmm.
low with their root systems, helping to keep our waters beautiful and clear, which is really helpful for the wildlife as well. So we oftentimes think of stormwater runoff as the pollutants in the water. But I also want us to recognize that here on the coast, just the amount of fresh water going into our coastal water bodies
Sure.
is a concern. And that is because of our amazing oysters. Our
Right.
oysters do so much for us. They're not just nutritious and delicious. We love to eat them. Eating North Carolina oysters is wonderful for our coastal economy here. But they clean and filter our water. They
Yes.
provide all of this habitat. They protect our shorelines from erosion. Oysters are a keystone species. We need our oysters. They are so important. And I always like
Hmm.
to joke, oysters are just like me. We want time to adjust. We want time to change. And
Hmm.
so oysters do not do well when, say you go from maybe 20 parts per thousand to 0 parts per thousand
Sure.
salinity because you've got all this influx of fresh water. So here on our coast, it's not just the pollutants that is the problem, it's the sheer volume
Okay.
of stormwater runoff that will disrupt our coastal ecosystems. They'll kill off our oysters, and then that results in a lot of other destruction down the line. And so, first and foremost, we want to just try to capture that water. What was nature doing 200 years ago? It was
Right.
absorbing the majority of this water. Only a little bit was getting back into the water bodies. So that's what we try to mimic through nature-based solutions. Um, we have a great publication called Smart Yards.
Okay.
This is where homeowners, business owners, people that have property can go and make simple adjustments to, again, instead of diverting that stormwater runoff off of the property, trying to get
Right.
it out as quickly as possible into the storm drain, into that creek where it receives no filtering process. It's just going right into that water body. We want to absorb it. And so there are various ways, right? It can be as simple as rerouting your downspout. Instead of going from your driveway into the storm drain, we reroute it so it goes into your yard.
Hmm.
That's simple enough. Or we can improve that process by incorporating a rain garden. Nothing super crazy about a rain garden. It's just strategically put where it can capture that runoff.
Hmm.
So, for example, where you direct your downspout into this rain garden, a little bit down slope so it can capture that water, dig it out a bit so it's shallow, it can hold some water, fill it with mulch, native plants that are going to absorb all of that water. So rain gardens have shown to reduce stormwater runoff by up to 90%. These are a simple but very effective way at reducing and absorbing the
Yeah.
stormwater runoff.
And I think when you look at some of the design of the neighborhoods, I mean, things in parking lots, things as simple as a bioswale as opposed to
Right.
having it, in the gutter going down the storm drain, just,
Yes.
without being either one filtered or slowed down. I mean, I know
Yes.
here that the homes, the gutters go into a channel that pop up. I mean, it rained so
Yes.
hard that it looked like a fountain coming out of the street. And because the
Yes.
property's not capturing the water, it's just
Right.
coming right off the house into a drain
Yes.
pipe. And they have this little green things that, with the hard
Yes.
rains, pop off. You talked a little bit about native plants as well. And
Yes.
there are certainly enough here in North Carolina that would be suitable for a rain garden.
Yes, absolutely. And I cannot push the native plants more. I studied marine biology at UNC Wilmington. That is my background. I never had a green thumb, but now working in the Coastal Federation and working on our goals, I recognize just how important native plants
Yeah,
are to
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
And also how simple it can be. I tell folks all the time, you don't have to do it 100%. Just incorporate some native
Sure.
plants into your property. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Even having just 20 to 30% of your landscaping be native is going to significantly help our wildlife. It's going to significantly help you as a property owner because our native plants, their root systems are typically much more deep, much more complex. They absorb so much more
Hmm.
water than the non-natives do. I always say the best flood prevention are mature trees. If you have mature
Sure.
trees on your property, you have a great flood prevention right there on your
Yep.
property.
Yeah.
And so native plants do such a great job of that. They do such a better job at helping our wildlife, not just the birds and the bees and the pollinators, right?
Sure.
We think about the pollinators, but I like to tell this story about the chickadee that needs to eat up to 6,000 caterpillars a day,
Mm.
which is
Sure.
wild for such this
Yeah.
small bird. So they need trees that are
Sure.
going to provide all of those caterpillars.
Mm.
And they compared a live oak with the non-native crepe myrtle, and they found that the live oak had 12,000 caterpillars on it, whereas the crepe myrtle only had three, not
Okay.
3,000, three.
Okay.
So just an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting photographs that I saw in your library online was the artificial reef made from oyster shells. And before
Yes.
we talk about that, I went to the Brunswick County had a cleanup day, and we brought some paint to get latex paint to get rid of environmentally responsibly. And when I was there, there was a place, and it was people were dumping used oyster shells,
Yes.
which I'm presuming then are collected by you or other organizations. So maybe you could
Yes.
talk a little bit about the artificial reef project that you did. It really is fascinating.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's also a perfect segue, right? Because this really gets us into the conversation of development, right? So,
Hmm.
we're talking about these things, we're talking about the neighborhoods. So, one thing with the Coastal Federation, we want to try to protect land from being developed when and where we can. But of course, we understand development is going to happen. So when we develop, how can we develop with the environment in mind? And this is where we can, talk about the stormwater retrofits like the rain gardens, but also living shorelines come into play.
Hmm.
So this living shorelines are an environmentally friendly solution to erosion control.
Hmm.
So for decades, the typical response was to put in a bulkhead, a seawall when
Hmm.
there was coastal erosion. But there, we were seeing not only did this not hold up well in storms and sea level rise, but it completely destroyed the natural habitat that was actually doing the best job at controlling that erosion.
Hmm.
Those oyster reefs
Yeah.
help to absorb that wave energy,
Right.
disperse that wave energy, helps to accrue the sediment behind it. The salt marsh grasses, those root systems stabilize the shoreline. So instead of putting in a bulkhead that just destroys that habitat, we actually want to reinforce and build up that habitat because that's what's really happening is the loss of habitat is happening and that is what's contributing to this coastal erosion in some cases. And so living shorelines, there's a variety of techniques. Part of our work was creating the Living Shoreline Academy, doing living shoreline trainings for marine contractors. Many of those marine contractors have turned their business model around from building bulkheads
Hmm.
to now building living shorelines. Other marine contractors have popped up that are just doing this type of work. And so essentially, we're going out into that intertidal zone,
Right.
creating a structure that's going to recruit oysters. And those oysters are going to create that living shoreline, which will accrue sediment behind it. Then we go in, um, after a few months after that sediment has accrued, we plant marsh grass. We
Hmm.
just did a living shoreline construction with volunteers at Morris Landing Clean Water Preserve at the end of March, which was really
Okay.
exciting. And we hope to go back in a few months with volunteers to plant marsh grass there. Um, but so that's our living shoreline process. But one of I mentioned there's a variety of techniques. They really had to start to get creative because there is a shortage of oyster shells.
Sure.
So, one thing that's really important about oysters and understanding this about oysters is the fact that once they settle, they need something hard to settle and grow. And once they settle, they can't move, right? So, this is how
Okay.
they form these beautiful reefs.
Okay.
But it's very important that they have something hard to settle on and grow. If they land in the sand, the sediment, the mud, they can't survive. And so that is why it's so important that we're putting shell back in the water when and where oysters are reproducing. This is very important
Hmm.
because if we just throw them back willy-nilly, we risk them being buried by the sediment, by the mud.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
then they're not able to recruit the
Right.
oyster growth. And
Yeah.
that's the whole point of putting these shells back in the water is to encourage that oyster recruitment growth. And so that's why we have those shell recycling drop-off
Sure.
locations. That we don't want people to just throw it right back into the Intracoastal Waterway.
Yeah.
We want to give it time to get baked by the sun to cure so it's
Okay.
clean, and then we strategically put it back.
Okay. That I mean that was really fascinating to see at
Yeah.
at the landfill was this huge thing of oyster shells. In a previous life we were involved, the organization I led, we did shoreline restoration project and also a fresh stream restoration with freshwater mussels to help clean the water as it was making
Yes,
its way down in our case to the Potomac watershed or the Occoquan River,
right.
which feeds the Potomac. But it's important work. The brochure that and I will include a link for folks to take a look at. It's called Smart Yard. Do I have that
Yes.
correct?
Smart yards,
Oh,
correct.
Smart Yards. Okay, I will make sure that that is included in the blog post. Listen, I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yes,
I know it's busy.
yes.
It's really important work. I mean,
Thank
the
you.
coast has a multi-billion-dollar economic impact, whether it's tourism, fisheries, etc. The maritime industry is important to the overall state as a whole. So, whatever we could do at home, native plants, rain gardens, etc. A brochure like Smart Yards, I'm sure will be very important. So, Bonnie, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.